On November 19th, 2016, I visited the Terezin Memorial located in the Czech Republic. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the memorial site by the Ovray River. I'm going to do a visual analysis of it and present that here. When I got to the Terezin Memorial, I started at the small fortress. Here's the entrance to the small fortress. I met my guide there who took me on a tour of the small fortress and shared lots of information about that part of the memorial. And as I was getting ready to leave the memorial, she pointed me to the map that I received and gave me some information, gave me some pointers about how I should view the rest of the memorial. You can see here on the right, this is the small fortress, and this is where I started. And then this larger part is the large fortress, also known as the Terezin Ghetto, where Jewish and other victims were kept during the war. And here are listed the places that basically I was going to walk and view those sites by myself. And you can see here by my notes, she was telling me, kind of giving me an idea of how I might want to, view the sites. It was raining most of the day, not a heavy rain, but a pretty consistent light rain. And so she suggested that I skip number 2, which you can see here is the memorial site by the Ovray River. And so I left the small fortress here, walked down over the river, and then turned right. And this is where the entrance to the what is now the city, and was then the Terezin Ghetto. But since I study memorials, I really wanted to see number 2. So I decided I would just go ahead and walk to the memorial, and it wasn't that far. So I headed that direction, and I was really glad that I did. When I analyze a memorial site, or when I analyze any kind of visual, one of the most important questions I think is, why was that visual created? What is the reason? What is the purpose? If you know the creator of the image, did they have some goal in mind? And when I'm looking at memorial sites, I generally look for the mission. And so on the Terezin Memorial site, it was very easy to find their mission. And here you can see the key mission is to commemorate the victims and the racial persecution that they endured, the suffering and death of dozens of thousands of victims of violence. So you can see here, this explains a little bit more about what the memorial was built to memorialize. At this place in November 1944, the ashes of 22,000 Jewish victims from the Terezin Ghetto were ordered by the Nazis to be thrown into the Ovray River. As happened at many of the Nazi concentration camps, once they realized that they would be taken over by Allied forces, they attempted to destroy and get rid of as much evidence as they could. And the ashes here were taken from the columbarium located in the ghetto, and they were brought to the river and then thrown into the river. So the memorial is dedicated to the memory of the people represented in that group. Also, I think when you look at analyzing an image, you want to think about what is the history. How has the site or the image changed? And in this case, the original um, memorial was a wooden Star of David. A much different, smaller memorial was originally there. But these steps leading down to the river were actually there as well originally. Now, the current site, this is my first glimpse of it as I was walking towards the memorial. And my first impression of it was I was really, really glad that I had decided to walk to view the memorial. And this larger structure really caught my attention. It's different. It certainly leads you to think, what is being represented here. The setting is very beautiful. The scenery and next to the river. So my initial impressions were very positive, and I was very interested to get closer and learn more about it. On one website that I found, the Association for Military Sacred Places, there was a picture of the memorial, and they listed underneath it said author Yuri Zukumel. But I'm not 100% positive that that is the person who designed the memorial. It very well may be, but I need to check into that a little bit more. But I've identified that name. I'm just not sure at this point whether or not that's 100% accurate. The when I got to the memorial and I was viewing it, I didn't quite get it first that I didn't really see the figure. I can see the figure now, the arms, and then it looks like the head maybe is leaned to the right. But at first I wasn't completely sure. I saw that a little bit, but not completely. This is a commemorative urn made out of granite. So I continued to walk around the sculpture and view it and take pictures from all the sides and angles. You can see there are steps leading up. It sits on a not a very high platform, but it is a little bit elevated. The main The main elements located at this site are the larger structure, the urn, and then there's also a grave stone type of feature. And this is basically how they sit in relation to each other. The larger structure and the urn next to it, and then this sits off a little bit off to the side, a little bit separated. Now, when you think about color, the color is very interesting. The larger structure is made out of sandstone, and then you can see the base is basically concrete. The sandstone, these pictures were taken, within a minute, if that much, of each other. And you can see, depending on the angle and the distance, the differing color that you could see in the sandstone. Of course, it's a natural material. Here, much darker, but still with very earthy, orangey tones. Here, much lighter, the white. You can see white in there. Again, orange. Earthy to represent, I would think, maybe the ashes, the natural elements of earth, the natural elements of our bodies, and connecting, back with the ground after we pass on. As far as lines and dimensions and balance, there are definitely horizontal lines, many horizontal lines pointing upward. But you also have this sort of 2D effect with these elements that protrude out from the basic, more square part of the structure. And in these, you can see there are lines, but these are not straight lines. These lines are serrated and cut and ragged. And then you can see the connection that, again, with the scenery around it, the nature. You can see the grass, the trees, the greenery, and the contrast there. But lots of roughness, natural elements, the jaggedness. So it's got that symmetry, but it's also got that less balanced, jagged lines and many less structured shapes. Now, continuing to look at the color and the shape and the material on the side, you see more of just the regular, what the sandstone, the basic sandstone would look like. And then you have these elements that protrude out. But then when you look a little bit closer, you find elements like this rock. It's very ornamental, and it's very, it's got the goldish band, and it's shiny. Symbolically, I don't know, just the different elements and how the different elements come together. Rocks can represent strength. And then this is very interesting. This I thought was probably one of the neatest parts of the structure. When you look at this panel here, these look like faces. And you can see the way they're lined up and sort of stacked, one on top of the other. And then when you look closer, you see the image of the eye. Certainly a questioning, sad eye. Representing, the faces could represent the victims. The eye looking out, watching over their remains. The sadness that the victims would have experienced. Many ways to interpret. And from a style standpoint, it's sort of got an Inca, like the Inca Indians. It sort of has that style. Now, when I got to the back of the larger structure, that's when I knew for sure that it did represent, some kind of a person standing. And when you look at the back, definitely the rough structure. Again, the colors, the muted, earthy tones, the roughness, the natural feel. And then definitely the symmetrical lines, the horizontal symmetrical lines. And in this picture, when you look from this perspective, the trees, you can see the top of the trees, you can see the sky. And I had the feeling of movement in terms of the structure rising from the base up towards the sky. And then the hands pointing towards the sky. So I had this feeling of movement, as in looking towards, reaching towards the sky. I also see strength here. This could, I don't know, this back panel could be like a robe even, or you could see these parts as legs, but I see strength there. The stone gives it the strong feel. The arms are sturdy and thick. So in that image I see strength and rising, maybe rising above, and that there's a hope, a higher hope, a better future, maybe, kind of interpretation. Now, the hands and the top part of the structure, certainly I would assume the author wanted us to kind of think about, and didn't want this to be like just an obvious representation. I mean, definitely to get us to think. Perhaps, as I said earlier, perhaps it's a head leaning to the side, or maybe the face is covered or hidden. And then the hands certainly, rising up, could be symbolic of prayer. And then when I try to examine this, what is inside the hands, I got these smaller images show a little bit better, although not as clear as I would have liked. I can almost see a face in this one. Over on this one, it's not as clear, but I don't know, perhaps the idea of holding the people, protecting them, or maybe it's, the face, again, a face representative of a victim needing protection. I mean, when you look at it from a distance, or you look at something like this, it could be a rock, again, representing, that our bodies are made out of natural elements from the earth. Or maybe, I even thought maybe an egg, the idea of continued growth and renewal. But definitely something having to do with protecting and even honoring, maybe. We're going to hold that up for the world to see, and try to protect, and try to show the importance of a life, how important lives are. Sorry. Okay, here again. So when we look at the memorial from a larger perspective, does it represent the victims, and does it, fulfill the mission? I think it certainly does. I mean, it's definitely focused on the victims, and it's very tastefully done, but it also has a very I think it certainly presents with honor, the memory of these victims. One last thing I'll point out, the surrounding area here, this field over here is actually a golf course. So I always find it interesting to think about, what happened in these spaces, in these memorials, where these memorial sites are, how that represents, the atrocities that happen here, juxtaposed against, modern life and the events that occur in modern life. But then memorials like this, to help us continue to realize the importance of, what the Holocaust events represent. And then my references that I haven't listed yet, but you definitely will want to have in your presentation.